record. Okay, you ready?
Yeah.
Yes.
Lisa and Lori, welcome to Dying to Live. I'm so excited to talk to you today.
We are excited to be here.
Yes, thank you for having us.
Yeah, I always love having conversations with folks who have a certain experience or comfort level around death. We're kind of the weird kids at the table, if you will. And I was really excited to have you on and to make sure that all of my listeners know who you are and know what the death deck is, because a couple different things. One, I think your story is really beautiful and unique, and I want to invite you to tell that story in a moment, not only in how y'all came together, but also how you built something out of the way that you came together, and carried it forward in a way that services, the rest of us here in this human society. So I'd love for you to tell more about that. And also the way that you have developed a really accessible mechanism for having really difficult conversations. Dare I say it's a fun card game. So I'm excited to talk about it today. And I wonder if you could start by just telling the audience a little bit about how you all came together and where the death deck idea came from.
Certainly. Yeah. Well, again, thanks for having us on. We actually loved meeting you and playing the game with you last year at the Honoring Choices conference. So it was fun to meet, and we're sorry we didn't get to see you in person this year, but maybe next year.
For sure, next year.
So our story is started on the tragic note that my husband was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. And for about a year, went through all the treatments, but got to a point where it was the end of his life. We called in hospice to be at home with us. And fortunately, Lisa was one of the hospice workers, the social worker that came through my door to help us sort of figure out what was going on, how to deal with it. Helped me with our two small children at the time that were 3 and 6. And also helped Joe in his final days. So, I was one of those people that knew nothing about what was going to happen. It was very chaotic. I had not experienced death so intimately than when I did with him. And so I was completely taken off guard by so many things. And so thankfully, Lisa was there to talk it through. We ended up, after he died, Lisa continued to come and help me with talking through all of the things that happened, helping me through grief. I know I extended our stays a bit because I think hospice support usually is a couple of months. Lisa, you can correct me if I'm wrong there, but I just kept calling and she just kept coming over. So it was, we had this bond, this friendship, and this just deep understanding of, what it was to talk about death. And I was finally able to understand it more and talk about it more with Lisa. And, after many, many conversations, it finally came out that I was very frustrated and angry that I didn't know more of what to talk about. I didn't have these conversations with my husband before he died. I didn't have these conversations before, he was diagnosed. And so I was caught off guard, like so many people are. And she shared with me that, that is very common with people that she sees in hospice. They get to the end and they had no conversations and it's just a mess. So from our conversations and from all of that, we decided, well, what can we do? And we decided to make it into a card game, make it a conversation tool, a card game. And yes, you can say it is fun because we have added a dose of humor in there, but just to, get something out there that can help break the ice, to help people get a little more comfortable talking and even saying the word death and dying. So with that, I will toss to Lisa and let her speak.
Well, you just summarized everything so well, Lori. I mean, that may have been your best summary so far.
Yes, you heard it here.
I will say that the hospice does provide bereavement care for typically a year after someone dies. It looks different based on the different hospice agencies and what they offer, but they have to provide some sort of bereavement support. I was lucky enough to have some flexible managers, and so I really liked Lori, and felt like she used my services well. You know, she was calling because she wanted me to come, and I felt very useful and helpful, and felt like it was actually a very good use of my time, as well as just enjoying Lori's company.
And I think it's really interesting. People might have a preconceived notion about what hospice services are, and the fact that it can be extended to provide grief support, I think, is interesting. If you don't mind giving a little bit more information about that.
Sure. I mean, just the general hospice here in the U.S. is typically, composed of the hospice team, which has social workers, chaplains, nurses, bath aides, and volunteers. And then we have our physician and managers. But and there's home hospice, and then some areas have more hospice facilities. It depends on where you live. But the work that I do is primarily in the home or in boarding care or residential facilities, but mostly home. And we come into the home and we provide support to the patient and the family through the dying process. And some people are actually on hospice longer than you would think. Joe is actually kind of typical because he was young. People tend to come onto hospice much later when they're young because they are continuing to try all the treatments. Mm-hmm. Some of our 90-something-year-olds come on earlier. Mm-hmm. They might actually live longer because they forego all treatment. And so some of our patients actually live a year, sometimes people with dementia even longer on hospice services. The bereavement support is available mostly in groups. That's the predominant way that hospice programs provide grief support, is through mailings and education, as well as quarterly phone calls, checking in with people, and then the groups. Grief support groups are typically available with every hospice. And so it's actually a great resource. Even if your loved one wasn't on hospice, typically that they will allow you to join their hospice grief support group. So if you're looking for a grief support group, it's always good to connect with the hospices in your local area.
Oh, that's great to know. Thank you for telling folks that. I'm not sure that is understandable or gets enough, marketing and awareness behind it. So that's great to know. So as you both were kind of in this bereavement conversation, and you're talking about probably a lot about how we don't talk about death and some of the things that you experienced, Lori, there at the end. How did the death deck get birthed? Like, how did those conversations go? And then maybe tell people a little bit about what the death deck is and how you came up with the questions and all of that good stuff.
Yeah, I think the actual birth of it, in hindsight, was the conversation that I had to have with Joe a couple of months before he died. And I remember that moment, like, we held hope through leading up to that. The 8 months leading up to that was, no, he's not going to die. We held hope. And then there were a couple things that happened, and I realized that this was probably not going to turn out the way we wanted it to, and he was probably going to die. And there were things that I didn't know. So at that moment, which is the complete wrong moment to have this conversation, is the time that I had to have that conversation. And he was on a lot of pain medication, and I could tell there were certain moments between pain medications that I could, sort of get him to have a conversation. And so I had to sit him down, and I had my laptop out. I had questions already written out, and it was a short conversation. He answered it as if he had thought of it, but just never shared it with me.
Mm.
I got enough of the basics down, and that was it. I mean, it was very short, but it got just enough information, and it was extremely painful. It was an absolute horrible situation to have with someone, and to have, and that was the only conversation that we really had. So fast forward to, a number of months into grief and talking to Lisa, and, going back to that conversation, it's like, why did we wait till then? Why did we wait till then? Why are people waiting until then? That's not the time. So, I'm an example. We just didn't want to talk about it, and we wanted to hold hope, and we didn't think it was going to happen to us, but it does happen. So, it was a frustration of, well, why not? Like, why did we not have more detailed conversations when we went to the estate planner 10 years earlier, when we first, decided we were going to start to have a family? So there wasn't the tool out there. And so we realized, what can we do? What we need to do something about it. We were so passionate about it. And, Lisa is so frustrated every day, I think, with, seeing people like me. But I guess I was the first one to sort of be extremely vocal and saying, why does this happen? And what can we do to help? So what can we do? I came from a background of humor, and that's always been my thing. And it's like, well, let's do something that has a little edge of humor. Let's get people laughing, and then we'll ease into having deeper conversations. So, it was just an idea of, well, what's out there. So we looked out there, and there's some incredible conversation tools that are cards, but it's not a game. And we thought, well, we want to also target the wider audience. We don't want to just have people having these conversations at the end of life, or if someone has a long-term diagnosis. We want people to have them now. So we came up with an idea of coming up with a game, and we spent a long time researching, writing questions, and we tried to cover as much as we could, not just of end of life, but of, death, dying, end of life, afterlife, those sorts of things. And we tried to structure it where it's not just asking you the question, it's sort of thinking about it in a wider way, or just having more conversations about death in general.
What I loved about it when I experienced it at your event in groups of people. So we broke it into smaller groups. I think there was 6 or 7 people in my group. And it was really an opportunity too, to share different perspectives and to hear, different ways of thinking about all of these topics, that then ended up personally broadening my thinking about the topics too. And I thought that was a really beautiful, maybe byproduct of this as well. What a beautiful way to just connect with others about a topic that is taboo, and yet you make it so accessible because you did add in this human quality and this fun factor and humor to it, which is just brilliant.
Yeah, I've really enjoyed watching and feeling the connections that come from these type of conversations. And I think some of it is just, having difficult conversations or talking about kind of meatier stuff makes you feel closer to somebody. We can all just talk about what TV show we're watching and you laugh, and I'm not going to remember that conversation tomorrow at all. But if we're talking about something that really is meaningful and people are sharing stories, and again, like you said, Kristen, saying things that that may even change my perspective on how I feel or how I view. I mean, Lori and I keep changing our answers to our own questions, because the more we play it with different people, the more we're like, oh yeah, I hadn't really thought about it like that. No, I'm now an A. I take it back, and I think that's just an incredible, opportunity for growth and connection.
Oh, that's a really good point, because with or without, sharing it with others, even just going through it yourself over time, as you evolve as a person, your answers are likely to change as well. And it's interesting to watch that evolution happen in the answers that you pick. Yeah, that's very cool. How many, Lisa, folks that you have seen along the way in your work are in the same boat that Lori was, where the conversations haven't been had, and now you have the person who is the loved one who is surviving, who has to, dive into the subject already grieving, or anticipatorily grieving, and then diving into these questions and having to shoulder that. Is that something that's pretty prevalent that you see?
It's very prevalent. Yes. Yes. And I would say, I mean, sometimes people will get the bare bone basic, like dad wants to be cremated, right? They might know that. They don't know anything else related to that. And they're kind of like, okay, that's done. We know the dad wants to be cremated. And it's like, okay, but what about all these other things? Not just what's going to happen to his cremated remains, but what about when he can't speak anymore and he's very sick right now, and how does he feel about pain medicine? Does he like having a lot of visitors here? Is he more of a quiet person? All of these other aspects that talk more about the dying experience, as well as some of the who's going to make decisions for you, and some of those advanced care planning topics too. But there's so much, and sometimes families have zero conversations and they won't even let us say that we are from hospice, which is one, like the far side. And then occasionally we have these really beautiful, moments in families who have laid it all on the table, and they've had very open communication about, the illness and the dying process and what they want afterwards. And the difference in the feeling in the home, when you walk in a room, a home that's very open and dare I say accepting of what's happening, versus the home that is hush hush. We just want to keep focusing on dad getting stronger. We want him to get off hospice. It's just night and day in terms of how I see the family members' peace at the end.
Yeah, I can imagine just the nervous systems in the homes. The one scenario, they're down at a peaceful level, and in the other, everybody's keeping a secret. And in my experience too, it's the first scenario that you mentioned often is, well, don't tell dad he's dying. And then dad's like, don't tell them I'm dying. Everybody knows, but no one's talking about it.
Yes, they're both protecting each other. And, the person that's dying, really, they know they're dying. I've never met a person that's dying that doesn't know it. They may not put it in those exact words, but they know. And so they're typically trying to protect their family members from the knowledge. Yeah.
Yeah, I had a scenario with my stepmom. We took care of her at home. We didn't have a lot of hospice assistants, unfortunately, because hospice was very overloaded at the time. So we didn't have as many visits as we had wanted, and we're kind of left to deal with things ourselves with, some phone calls. But she was adamant actually that she was not dying. And like a couple days before, kind of going into those last kind of unconscious days, I was kind of tidying things up and got into one of her drawers of her dresser. And she said, I'm going to need all of that because I'm going back to work soon and I'm just going to need it. And I thought, okay, I'm not sure how to organize that. And, on my side of the coin for my sister and I, we really wanted to be able to have those conversations about her wants and desires, about her life, about our lives with her. And it just wasn't possible. So the more that we can do to initiate those conversations before they become necessary is going to be so healing for everybody.
Yes. And I was too strong when I said never, because there's never a never, right? There's always the occasional person who really doesn't believe, although sometimes there's brain cancer or brain involvement. So I'm just going to say sometimes
Yeah,
it's
sure.
like a neurological and not understanding. But I think in general, people, once someone is really sick, as Lori said, and as you are alluding to, Kristen, is like once they're sick, the conversation changes. Like the purpose of talking about death and dying becomes like, because you think I'm going to die, and it's like, whoa, and so that is why. That is exactly why we want people of all ages, while they're healthy, kind of having these conversations, getting comfortable with these conversations so that it doesn't feel in your face when you're terminally ill.
Yeah. And how have both of your lives evolved since this launched? And you've, had probably not a million events because of the last year, but many events and certainly virtual ones and conferences and things like that. How has this changed your life?
Well, for me, I mean, this has taken me on a new trajectory, really. I mean, I came from production and comedy, and, after Joe's death, I shut down, and we had a business that we had to shut down. And so, creating this game and getting it out there and having the response of people buying well beyond family and friends. You release something, a book or a product, and you're like, okay, I know my family and friends are going to buy this, but who knows from there? And it's definitely caught on, and it's definitely opened up this world and this, the end of life, death and dying space. I mean, there is just such incredible compassion and stories like mine where people, are completely taken by, what's happening and, how it's being dealt with. And it changes your life, and the more I talk about it and get myself involved in this space, the more I really do appreciate, life and living, and really see the beauty in all of this. So that's I think how it's changed me.
That's beautiful.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'll say, in addition to being much busier, it's also, I've worked in end of life for about 15 years, and I have, I was always passionate about it, and talked to people about it, outside of work, and everyone came to me as, oh, ask Lisa, she'll know, any of these end of life and healthcare questions. But I hadn't really explored all of what there is out in the positive death movement and the death community and the grief community. And so, doing the death deck, creating that and becoming part of this larger community has really opened my eyes to how much there is out there, and given me this increased passion, and like, okay, I really know that this is what I want to do with my life, is helping change the conversations around death. And it, like Lori said, I mean, we've met such incredible people, and seeing all of these amazing things that people are doing to try to, that are aligned with my values and my beliefs and like what I'm trying to do. And so it's been really exciting.
Yeah, what strikes me is just the theme that I kind of keep coming back to in all of this work, which is there can be such beauty that comes from all of this. And especially in the last year, as we've, as a society and a world, been unable to hide from death in the ways that maybe we have in the past, I think the conversation is just opening more and more. And there's a comfort level with wanting to have more peace with the fact that, our lives are finite. And I would say that this is a great way to get started in having a conversation with yourself and others. And I wonder if we could maybe go a couple rounds, share some cards.
Absolutely.
Awesome. I have mine. Do you have yours?
I do.
Of course.
Oh, look, there it is.
And I think you asked before, basically, for people who don't know about the card game, it is a deck of cards. It's 112 cards. 80 of them are multiple choice, which they have 3 options for answers, and 32 of them are open-ended. And the reason why we did the multiple choice is when we were researching out, they're not don't think there was another game at the time that had multiple choice answers. And what we found with asking questions about death and dying and end of life and all of this is when you give a point blank question, it's really hard sometimes to give an answer back. And people feel very much on the hot seat of, oh gosh, I hadn't thought of that and I don't know. And it just kind of becomes a blur. So we decided, you know what? We're going to make multiple choice. So if you haven't thought about an answer, you can align yourself to what feels right and then continue to think about it from there. And then the open-ended ones we included are not your normal open-ended cards. They take you on a little bit of a journey outside of what you might consider, do you have an advance directive? So, and we can play some of those, but it can be played as a game. We like to encourage people host a game night or a Zoom game night and partner up or couple up and try to guess each other's answers and get points for doing so. It's also widely used as a conversation tool. So to start a meeting or to start a Zoom, just to kind of get a conversation flowing. Hey, I'm going to ask a question, and a question is presented, and it's incredible where the conversations go. So that's the brief explanation of the game itself. I don't know if you have a card, Kristen, that you want to start with. Oh yeah, of course you do.
Sure, of course.
Is it your favorite card, or did you just pull it randomly?
I'm pulling it randomly because
Okay.
that's how life is.
Daring.
Yeah.
Okay, let's do it.
So we'll see what we get. Thank you for that explanation, by the way. I love the multiple choice options as well, because for a topic that people might not be comfortable with, it gives them a starting point. And I can remember in the group that I was in, people would say, "Oh, I think I'm A, but you know what? I'll have a little bit of B and maybe a little bit of C." And so then you get a D, E, or F that wasn't offered. That is totally an awesome option as well. That gets people thinking.
I mean, you're not going to score a point, but
Right.
but you do get a great conversation out of it.
Right.
So.
Yeah.
Okay. Of course. Let's start with this one. What scares you the most about dying? A, fear of the unknown. B, the pain of the process. Or C, it happening too soon.
So, Lori, I think I know your answer to this one.
Go for it.
It happening too soon.
That is correct. And you are the pain in the process.
What's that?
You are pain in the process.
I am.
Yes.
Ooh.
I am.
And I think Kristen is also happening too soon. That's going to be my guess for you.
that is right.
Yes.
That is
Look
right.
at us.
Those
Wow.
points.
Look at us, ladies.
We good.
Yeah.
Does someone else want to do a card?
Sure. Go for it, Lisa.
Okay. Growing up, my family dealt with death, A, by talking openly, sharing feelings, stories, and dark humor. B, in a no-nonsense sort of way. Shit happens, you move on. Or C, keeping it all bottled up and avoiding any discussion.
And I just have to say, we did discuss this before, but the first card that I was going to pull is that card. So
Oh, no way.
it doesn't happen. I didn't know you were going to play that one, Lisa.
Really? We both picked the same one to start today?
We did. We did.
That's awesome.
Unplanned.
And I honestly need to think about what your answer is to that one. If I'm going to try and guess,
Okay.
I'm going to say, I think it's B.
That's what I was going to say too.
It's B with a little C.
B with a little C. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you move on, you don't really talk about it. You get the very basics, which is not always ever a great thing because we should be talking about it. So.
Yeah. Yeah.
And Kristen, do you want to guess Lisa's answer?
Yeah. I'm going to say A.
You're right. You are right. My parents have a very dark, well, my mom may listen to this, so let me think of how I want to answer. My parents were always joking, and my dad especially, he's always joking about like, you're out of the will, and always made death a topic of humor, and we were included in all funerals, and so a pretty open family system in that way. So Kristen, let's see. I think B.
More like C with a side of B. So heavy on the not really talking about it with maybe some basics. I can remember my grandpa dying when I was in high school, and not really being given much of the information, and also not being invited to participate in the funeral or any of the ceremonies or services or anything. Is it just kind of, I don't know if it wasn't a place for kids in air quotes, or what that was, but looking back, yeah, that sure would have been helpful to have been a part of those ceremonies.
Yeah. And I what I see in my experience is that the kids and teenagers who are involved tend to grieve and cope better than the ones who are protected.
Yeah. So quick sidebar. My daughter just turned 13. So last year she was 12. We lost our cat of like 22 years. And I was so proud and amazed at her participation in the whole process. She's known a little bit of death, but not a lot. And this was certainly, having a death in the home was really different for her. But she came to the vet. She was with the cat the whole time. And then I felt really strongly about bringing the cat home and burying her in the backyard. And so the night before, she made a shroud. We got some vegetable paints and she made a shroud. And when we got home with the cat, she said, well, I want to carry the cat. And I said, okay, so I've got to tell you about what happens with the body after death, because you might be a little bit surprised. There's going to be some fluid. She was like, I don't care. Took the cat, that definitely happened. And then participated with the whole burial, placed the cat, did some ritual placement of flowers and things. And we did a song, and it was just so natural for her to participate in that fully. And when we give kids the chance, I think we'd be surprised at how natural the whole process becomes for them.
I so agree. That's so beautiful. And just on a sidebar to the sidebar, we lost our cat of 21 years when my son this just happened and he's 12. Oh. So very, very similar. And this was during COVID in December. Not like COVID's over, but this was in December. And so the vet actually came to the house in the backyard. Oh. And we were able to be outside in the backyard and sit with our little kitty. And I was very proud of him as well. He was there and he had said, she's been there for me my whole life. And so I'm going to be there for her. So,
oh my gosh.
I know, it's so sweet. It's so sweet. And now we rent. So we chose aquamation. So now we have our little ashes in this beautiful box here in our home on this little shelf. So,
oh, lovely.
Yeah, I think you're right though. We give kids, teenagers, young adults opportunities to honor and participate and be involved, and they'll rise to that.
And they learn early on that we can have a comfort level with it, even when it's uncomfortable.
Yeah. Yeah. And then they'll teach their kids.
Yep.
We're changing the future.
Let's do it.
One kitty at a time.
Yeah. Let's do one more card before we end.
Okay.
Kristen, do you have one in mind, or would you like me to pull one?
Oh, you do one.
Okay. All righty. I am going to go, I have two to choose from here. Let's go for, this one will be interesting. Okay. What do you believe happens when you die? A, it's either heaven or hell, depending. B, your soul spends a little time in bliss and then you reincarnate. Or C, total blackout. That's all, folks. I'm going to have you guess mine because Lisa knows mine. She's smirking down there.
That's what I was going to just ask if I could guess yours. I'm going to go with B.
Oh, you know me so well too. That's correct. Soul spends a little time in bliss and reincarnates. You are correct. And Kristen, I'm gonna guess yours. I'm thinking you're the same. I think you're a B.
I'm a B.
Okay.
All the way.
All right. And then you have to guess Lisa's.
I'm going to say you're a B
guess
too.
mine, Lori.
You're a B. We're Bs.
I'm a B with an asterisk. I'm a B. I'm a B with a, I think.
Oh.
Yeah.
What's on the other side of I think?
Oh, I've X'd out A and I've X'd out C. So I think B is where I'm landing because that's what I align most with, but I'm still, my spirituality is something that is still kind of evolving and has much more so during this process, to tell you the truth.
Oh, I bet. Yeah. Oh, interesting. Okay. Well, when we come back in, 24 months, we'll ask how that answer has evolved for you as well. We'll see where you are at that.
Excellent. I'll put it in the calendar.
Well, thank you both so much for being here. I wanted to see if you would leave folks with, one tidbit of knowledge or a piece of, I don't know if it's advice really, but just a thought on having conversations that are difficult, of this nature with people, with family, with friends, with community, before we sign off.
I have a lot of thoughts on that, but I'll try to be brief. The hardest conversations end up being the ones that feel so good when you're done. And there's so many things that I think we think about all the time, like, oh, I should talk to my husband about this, or we should talk about this, the college fund, the this, the that, and we just keep kind of avoiding them, and they hang out and linger. And when we actually have these conversations, one, it gets it out of our mind, but it's also, again, this meaty conversation where you're connecting with somebody. It's a hard conversation. It might be hard to start, but once you're in it, you're connecting, you're learning, you're growing, and you're walking away kind of knowing the other person better. And I think when it relates to death and dying, you're really, every conversation you have is this gift, because your loved one may be able to look back on that conversation. They'll remember the feeling, remember your words, and then they'll have the confidence to know what you would want during your dying process and afterwards. And so Lori's probably so tired of hearing me talk about confidence, but that is the number one thing that I see time and time again, is that the paperwork does not necessarily give people the confidence that they know what their loved one really thinks and believes about these topics, but the conversations do. They remember the words that were said, and when you actually talk it through. So that's, give your family the gift of confidence.
I love how you position it too as a gift that you're giving to people instead of something that you have to do, but a way that you're easing their lives and equipping them to help you through that situation. It's really beautiful.
Thank you.
Yeah, that was very well said, Lisa. It was exactly what I was going to say.
I took it.
Took it from me. No, not exactly, but yeah, no, it's like these conversations are hard, they're difficult, they're uncomfortable, but the sooner you start having them, the more comfortable they get. I mean, it really is something that you got to just jump into, and and start somewhere, but at least get the conversations going so that you have that. And then to add on as well is, for me, it was also more about having the conversations, which we really didn't, but to have those conversations about how you want your end of life to play out. Like my late husband, Joe, we didn't talk about we talked about cremation and after, but not, leading up to it. And he lost his ability to speak. So I had to, I knew him really well, but I had to second guess all of those sort of comfort things of all the senses in those last couple of weeks. And I wanted him to be comfortable. I wanted him to hear and see and smell and taste and touch all of those things that would make him comfortable and be peaceful at end of life. And he lost the ability to speak. We didn't talk about it. So I had to guess. And I think I did a really good job, but you always second guess. So, including those things as well to sort of, if by chance I can't speak, then this is how I want to see those last days play out. This is how I want my finale to be. And, I would highly recommend also incorporating that into your final wishes and paperwork and conversations.
That's a really good point. It's one of my favorite pieces of being in end of life is helping people understand that they can actually design into what those moments look like, because it builds their confidence and their comfort level as well to know, okay, I'm going to be taken care of in the way that I want to be, even when I can't advocate for myself. Someone else will be advocating for me. And then it builds the confidence, as you say, of your loved ones, community, friends, family, the people that are around you to know that they're doing well by you.
Right.
Exactly.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Well, let's keep having more of these conversations. They're so important. And I thank you so much for being here today and sharing this. And all of the information will be in the show notes. But do you want to also quickly just tell people where they can find you all in the Death Deck?
Sure. You can purchase the game at thedeathdeck.com. We're also available on Amazon. And then you can follow us at all social media at The Death Deck.
Amazing. Y'all need to go out and get this right away. It is life-changing. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Kristen.
Thank you.